that somehow the secret committee was going to get to his house before he did. Finally, he got home. And do you know what? His Uncle Sigmund was not even worried about this. He kind of just brushed it off. In fact, it almost seemed to excite him that this might be happening. Richard was absolutely baffled. Why in the world is he not as bothered by this as I am? Later that evening, as they were all talking around the fire, Uncle Sigmund said, This is fantastic. This is great news that they're starting to search from house to house, because this means the Bible is finally starting to take root here. People are hearing, and it's causing enough of an issue that they're really getting anxious. Richard's father, Thor, said, Yes, but are we sure this is a good thing? And his Uncle Sigmund said, Of course it's a good thing. Don't you believe that everyone should have the Bible? Well, yes, said Thor. But don't you have a Bible? Thor walked over and he turned a stool upside down, a stool that had a covering on it. And there underneath the stool was dangling a Bible that was tied there precariously so that no one would find it. He said, Yes, I believe that we should have a Bible. Then the brothers locked eyes, and Sigmund said to Thor, So what will you do? What will you do if the soldiers come here? What will you do if we get caught? Thor didn't know what to say. What would he do? He said, Your family, I know that I need to take care of you, but I honestly don't know what the right thing to do here is. Do I take care of family or the church? The brothers decided the best thing to do was to pray about this. And so they got down on their knees and they began to pray, asking God what they should do. They prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and finally Thor said, There's only one message I'm getting, and that is, I need to take care of my family. So I don't care what happens. I don't care who comes. I will take care of you, and I will be responsible for my actions. Although it made Richard proud to see his father being so brave, it also kind of frightened him. Because here, the problem wasn't being resolved. The family was still there. The committee was still looking for them. What was going to happen? That evening, he and Otto were talking, and he said, Otto, what was it like? He, of course, was thinking about the stoning, and Otto said, What do you mean? What was what like? And he said, The stoning. And Otto said, Oh, man, it was terrible. It hurt at first, but you get used to it. Wow. Richard thought, My goodness, this guy is brave. He said, How come you're so brave? Otto said, You'll be brave too when the time comes. Richard was not fully convinced. I mean, how can you be so brave? But yet these Anabaptists, they all seem to be so brave. Richard started wondering, what happens if we get kicked out of our home? Where do we go then? What's the plan? And so he said to Otto, What happens if we get kicked out? Otto looked at him and he said, I've been thinking the exact same thing. He said, we should come up with a secret place we can hide. That's a great idea, said Richard. Let's come up with a secret place. Where could that be? Otto said, Oh, I know exactly where it should be. In Prince Bishop's Woods. Richard said, No. Don't you understand? It's dangerous there. Don't you know what happens if you get caught there? Otto said, Exactly. So no one will look there. Richard said, Okay. When should we go? How about we go right now? Nobody needs us right now. Nobody would be looking for us. It did not take any convincing. Otto was like, Okay, let's go. And so they snuck out and they crossed the pasture and they crossed across Prince Bishop's field. And they got to the edge of the woods. They looked around. They didn't see anyone. Richard took the first step in. And you know what it's like when you step into the woods and your foot hits those branches and leaves that have got on the bottom. It sounded like an earthquake to him. It was so loud. Shh, quiet. And they gently snuck in. But it's difficult to walk through the woods when you're trying to be careful, when you're trying to be quiet, and when you're also looking around to make sure no one else is around. And so over and over again, they were tripping over roots, they were tripping over logs. And at one point, Richard thought he heard something, and he was walking along, and he sped up a little bit, and he tripped, and he tumbled down a little bit of a hill. Picked himself up, brushed him off, and sure enough, there was someone. He was sure of it. He heard the breathing. It was someone so close by. Who in the world could it be? And he spun around. Do you know who's there? Trudi Schwartz. Trudi, what are you doing here? Trudi laughed and said, what are you doing here? The boy said, we were exploring. What are you doing here? I'm exploring too. And Trudi said, you see, for the past few days, I've seen people sneaking into the woods right about dusk, and I want to know where they're going. And they said, oh, and we're looking for a secret hiding place in case they come to the house. And so they decided, okay, let's explore together. And so, sure enough, they started exploring, and they came up over a little bit of a hill, and there was the strangest thing. They poked their head through some bushes, and sure enough, it was a little clearing. Somebody had come and taken out the trees there. And there were logs on 3 sides, maybe a little bit of an outline. And on the 4th side, there was a stream running through. And the stream was a little bit deeper. They said, what is this? What in the world? Trudi says, it looks like a church. Richard said, this doesn't look like any church I've ever seen. No, it's a church. Otto said, oh man, it's kind of a nice church being out here in nature like this, isn't it? And as they were looking around, as they were exploring, all of a sudden they heard a noise. It was a little far off, but it was definitely coming closer and closer and closer. They heard twigs snapping. Was it an animal? Or was it a person? Kept coming closer and closer. And then they started to hear voices. Muffled voices at first, but they were definitely the voices of men. Coming closer and closer and closer. The children ducked down behind a bush, but the voices kept coming closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, a man stepped out into the clearing.